A new experiment by NYU professors was designed to reveal gender bias in political races by reenacting the presidential debates and gender swapping Hillary and Trump. They were hoping to prove that if Hillary were a man, she would have won. Instead, they found that Hillary Clinton would have been even more hateable as a man, with one female audience member even claiming that male Clinton was, quote, very punchable because he smiled too much. The researchers were even more startled when female Trump was rated as endearing, charming, respectable, and confident. So I guess you could say that backfired. Liberal women especially have criticized the experiment as, quote, total bullshit. Wednesday was International Women's Day, and the Women's March on Washington celebrated it by asking women to go on strike to force employers and businesses to see what it would be like without women, or something. Protesters in New York were arrested for blocking traffic. The municipal court in Providence, Rhode Island had to shut down because 8 female employees didn't show up for work, and schools in Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland all had to shut down because so many teachers stayed home. The protest really highlighted the need for equality between men and women, as a man would never be able to not show up for work in the name of social justice and not get fired. Women also rallied in Washington to protest the government not giving funding to overseas family planning organizations that discuss abortion. Organizations that we never should have funded in the first place because it's none of our damn business. A retired nurse on the scene in Indiana said the protest was about, quote, the injustice that women deal with, like jobs, everyday life, which is a very specific mission statement. Another woman who helped organize the Women's March in January told the New York Times, quote, I could think of better ways to spend my time. A teacher from Denver proudly told the Times that while she was off protesting, there was a male substitute running her classroom. The women of feminist website Jezebel also went on strike, but unfortunately went back to work on Thursday. So, in all, the day without a woman worked to take away from students trying to learn and put men in the jobs women would normally do, in one case making them the mouthpiece of an entire website. Epic fail. Also, the day gave us this gem from the verified Twitter account for the Women's March. Quote, women birth half the population and we are half the population. Jury's still out on who births the other half, but science is working diligently to find out. A new report by the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, which just so happens to be the top science and tech think tank in the US and second in the entire world, found that 92% of the most popular federal government websites fail to meet even the most basic standards for security, accessibility, and mobile friendliness. The report points out that most government websites don't even meet the government's own requirements, let alone private sector best practices. And you know what? I can vouch for that, as I haven't been able to pay my estimated state taxes in 3 quarters because the website hasn't worked in months. A subdivision in Mount Airy, Maryland is using everything from zoning law to false reports and ATF raids to scare out a man who moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago and requested a license to sell antique restored firearms out of his home. Mike Wansala, an FFL dealer, specializes in the restoration of firearms from the Civil War and World Wars, and requested to sell these restored items out of his home by appointment only, similarly to how several neighbors run by appointment salons and tax services from their homes. But the neighborhood has been protesting, claiming that it would allow any old gun dealer to set up shop next to the local bus stop and that it would pose a security risk to all local families because, of course, if a robber wants a gun, he's totally going to break into the house with 150-year-old revolvers and muzzle loaders. The entire debacle culminated in a petition garnering just over 150 signatures in a 10,000-resident town, which was created by a guy who wanted to end all home businesses in town because of how he thought it would affect property values. Residents claimed that Wansala's business would change the culture of the town and turn the whole place into a business park. Several neighbors also made false accusations to government officials that ended in an ATF raid on the man's home. The town voted down his request in December, saying it was a zoning issue rather than a gun or business issue, but has now moved to change the town code in order to ban firearm sales everywhere in town except for the small downtown area. The so-called emergency ordinance just passed on Monday, over 3 months since the original vote, but since it was designated as an emergency, it takes effect immediately. The ordinance was passed just 1 week before when Sala is scheduled to meet with the Board of Appeals. The House Republicans finally released their plan for healthcare reform this week. The bill is essentially ObamaCare 2.0 and could ultimately make healthcare even more expensive, would create a new entitlement that's not an entitlement, in the form of expensive tax credits, and a twist on the individual mandate in which if someone goes without health insurance for a little over 2 months, they'd be responsible for a 30% late enrollment surcharge to be paid directly to the insurance companies. Add to that the fact that the bill keeps the pre-existing conditions mandate, and you have an Obamacare Lite package that is just plain stupid and will end up encouraging people to only buy insurance when they're sick. The only good news is that the bill sucks so bad that if it somehow passes, it'll be pretty likely to self-destruct in short time. At this time, Trump says that he is open to negotiation on the details and surprisingly arranged several meetings with members of the Freedom Caucus and other conservative critics. The Trump administration is preparing its first federal budget and is reportedly considering cuts to the TSA, FEMA, and the Coast Guard in order to redistribute that money towards paying for the wall. According to Politico, the TSA may face a $500 million budget cut. Woohoo! FEMA would face a cut of $375 million, and the Coast Guard would be dealt the biggest blow with a cut of $1.3 billion. Any difference between the cuts and the wall cost would be made up in the form of higher security fees for airline passengers. So I guess Mexico's out. The FCC is launching an investigation after 911 emergency services were temporarily unavailable for AT&T customers in major cities across the U.S. on Wednesday. Nearly all major U.S. cities, including New York, Chicago, D.C., Detroit, and L.A., reported outages. Police in major metro areas were forced to use Twitter to tell residents to call the mainline non-emergency number if they were unable to call 911. While the outages reportedly only lasted for about an hour, it is not yet clear how many people were affected. If nothing else, it's proof that the police aren't always available and makes an excellent argument for the importance of home and self-defense. Virginia Representative Connolly told the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform this week that Congress may need to work on educating the public on the importance of centralized government and that D.C. is, quote, sacred ground. And yet statism is still not listed as a recognized religion. Trump made allegations this week that Obama wiretapped communications in Trump Tower during the 2016 election. Former National Intelligence Director James Clapper says he was unaware of any wiretapping under his part of the national security apparatus, but states he can't speak for any of the other government entities. Trump himself has yet to provide any evidence, though the idea isn't particularly far-fetched after it was revealed that Michael Flynn was wiretapped, which led to his resignation only 3 weeks into the presidency. Now, Obama's response is a little interesting. He has not flat-out denied any wiretapping, a fact pointed out by a former Obama speechwriter. Instead, Obama's statement simply said that the White House didn't interfere in any Department of Justice investigations, and that neither he nor the White House ever ordered surveillance on any U.S. citizen, which, isn't quite true. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice and the FBI have refused to comment, despite FBI Director James Comey asking the Justice Department to put the claims to bed. Certainly, anything is possible, especially when electronic surveillance requests are granted in secret by a secret court no one is supposed to know about that sometimes meets in the middle of the night. Meanwhile, Trump officials are now backpedaling, saying that Trump only thinks that it has happened and is opening a congressional investigation, which is different from what he said on Twitter. That concludes your Liberty-related news for the week. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you really like my videos and want to help me spread the message of liberty, you can help by supporting me on Patreon. Until next week, thanks for watching.